Hey, I'm Vadim, and unlike a lot of those YouTube channels with Reddit stories, I'm actually a real person, not just some AI-generated voice. These are my genuine thoughts and reactions. So grab a snack, sit back, and enjoy the stories. And try not to judge my gameplay too harshly. It's a complete mess. My wife falsely accused me of cheating. She took the kids, and I lost my job. I spent years rebuilding my life, and when she found out I had become wealthy, she tried to sue me for alimony. That's when I turned the situation around in the most unexpected way. I want to clarify something before I begin. I'm not writing this for sympathy or applause. I'm writing it because someone out there may be going through what I went through, and they need to know that going quiet doesn't mean giving up. My name is Knox. I'm 41. I work as a broker in land deals, parcels, mineral rights, agricultural leases. I met Stella when I was 29. Smart, organized, the kind of person who can walk into a room where everything is falling apart and make it look planned. We dated 14 months, married in early October, and within 3 years had 2 kids, Ren and Colt, a house on 4 acres, a marriage that looked solid from the outside. The first few years were real. What changed around year 5 is that Stella stopped being genuine and became strategic. Small things, how she managed information among friends, what she chose to mention and what she left out. I told myself it was stress. 2 kids, a growing business, my increasing travel. I kept giving her every reasonable explanation instead of the right one. Then Dario appeared. She hired him to redesign the home office. He came by 4 or 5 times over 6 weeks. I met him twice, shook his hand, made coffee. No particular impression, which I now understand was exactly what they were counting on. The accusation came on a Tuesday evening in March. I had just returned from a 3-day site survey. She sat me down at the kitchen table and slid a photograph across to me. It showed me at a land acquisition conference, standing at the registration desk next to a woman I'd had a 2-minute conversation with about the panel schedule. That was the entirety of our interaction. I didn't know her name. I still don't. Stella said she'd known for a while, that she had tried to look the other way, but couldn't anymore. I denied it. Completely, immediately, truthfully. I offered conference registration records, offered to call anyone who had been standing nearby. She listened, then picked up her phone and called her attorney. Not her mother, not a friend, her attorney. At 8:40 in the evening. In less than 24 hours, a story existed, and it wasn't my story. Her mother had called mine. Mutual friends were texting me asking if I was okay, the way people ask when they've already decided you're the problem. Our neighbor, who had watched the kids dozens of times, didn't wave from her porch for the first time in 4 years. Then my phone rang. My mother. Instead of support, she said, "Knox, Petra called me. She said you need to stop lying to people and just admit what you did." Petra, my sister, had heard it from someone who was there, a source that wouldn't have survived 30 seconds of scrutiny if anyone had checked. They were just passing it along. By the time a story travels that far, no one asks where it started. I sat in that car for another hour, not falling apart. I want to be precise about that. I was making a decision. There are 2 ways to respond when the ground goes out from under you. You can grab at anything solid in a panic, or you can go completely still and identify the edges before you move. I went still. The custody hearing was 6 weeks later. Temporary custody went to Stella. I was assigned supervised visits, twice a week, 2 hours each, in a visitation center with beige walls and fluorescent lighting. The first time I sat across from Ren and Colt in that room, Ren asked why we weren't at home. She was 7. I said we were working some things out. Colt was 5. He mostly wanted to show me a drawing he'd made at school, a house with 4 figures, labeled Mom, Ren, Colt, Dad. I kept that drawing. I still have it. 2 months later, my employer quietly restructured my position into a role with no client contact and no commission structure. I resigned in the 4th week. I also fired my attorney, not out of anger, but because I needed someone who understood this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a construction. With no one watching, I began going through everything. I pulled all financial records from the previous 2 years. And there it was. A hotel payment from 8 months before the accusation, in a city where Stella told me she was visiting a college friend. But cross-referenced against her calendar, she had listed it as a regional conference. The hotel was 40 miles from where Dario's design studio was operating at the time. I made a note, kept digging. Over 14 months, $31,000 had been withdrawn from our joint account in small, varying increments at regular intervals, designed to not look deliberate. Having watched how money behaves when people hide it in land deals, I recognized the pattern immediately. I documented everything and said nothing to anyone. Then I found the messages. Stella had carefully wiped her phone. What she hadn't accounted for was a shared cloud backup account we'd set up 2 years earlier for the kids' photos. She had forgotten it existed. I hadn't. The exchange between Stella and Dario began 9 months before the accusation. They weren't love letters. They were operational. Logistics, scheduling, contingencies. The conversation of 2 people managing a project, not a relationship. Then I reached one message from Dario, 11 months before Stella sat me down at that table. Once he's gone, the property in his name transfers automatically if we time the filing right. You're sure he doesn't have anything hidden? I read it 3 times. Then I closed the laptop, got in my car, and drove for 2 hours. This had never been about infidelity. I didn't panic. If anything, I felt completely calm for the first time since that Tuesday in March. Because panic belongs to uncertainty, and I was no longer uncertain. I knew exactly what had been done to me, who had done it, and I knew that if I moved wrong, if I called an attorney that night or forwarded those messages to anyone, it would be over before it started. The story was already written. I couldn't rewrite it with noise, only with proof so clean it couldn't be argued with. So I made one call. Not to family, not to a lawyer, to Fenwick, a private investigator I'd used 4 years earlier in a property boundary dispute. He was the kind of man who, when the other party offered him money to slow the investigation, told me immediately rather than accepting. That's a rare quality. He answered on the second ring. We met at a roadside diner 60 miles from my house. He read through everything carefully, without interrupting. When he finished, he leaned back and said 3 words. Don't touch anything. Don't forward the messages. Don't upload anything without proper chain of custody documentation. Don't confront Stella. Don't tell my attorney yet. Let him build the case properly. Then I did what required more discipline than anything I had ever done. I disappeared. Not literally. I still showed up to every supervised visit without exception. Every Tuesday, every Friday. I sat in that beige room, helped Ren with her reading, listened to Colt explain the differences between types of beetles. I gave Stella nothing during handoffs. No conversation beyond logistics, no reaction, no signal that anything had changed inside me. Everything had changed outside that room. I found a rental 4 hours away, paid cash month to month, gave the landlord my middle name. I restructured my business through a series of LLCs registered under my middle name combined with my mother's maiden name, working through intermediaries so my name rarely appeared in searches. I kept acquiring land. The money kept growing. No one who knew Knox before knew where Knox had gone. Fenwick worked in parallel, tracing the financial transfers against public business registration records. 7 months later, he found it. a Shell LLC registered in a neighboring state, with Dario's studio as managing partner and a silent partner listed only by initials. But state registration required a full legal name in the founding document, a publicly available document that no one had ever searched. Fenwick found it in 40 minutes. He also found Ava, a former employee who had left Dario's firm under hostile circumstances. She wasn't looking for trouble. She simply kept records, as people do when something feels wrong and there's no one to report it to. Her notes described 2 conversations she had overheard between Stella and Dario. One about making the photograph work, another about timing the filing to coincide with discrediting Knox. She signed a voluntary statement. Didn't want money, just wanted it documented. By the 3rd year, Fenwick handed me a physical case file 4 inches thick. I met with Horace, a retired federal litigation attorney who chose his cases based on how much the facts offended him. He reviewed the file over a full day, asked 3 clarifying questions, then said, "When she moves, we move." We didn't wait long. One Thursday morning, a voicemail. Stella had filed for alimony. I called Horace. He answered before the 2nd ring. I said, "She filed." A brief pause. Not surprise. Satisfaction. "Good. Come in tomorrow." We prepared for 4 days, not rehearsing what I would say. I wasn't going to say much. Horace told me the biggest mistake innocent people make in courtrooms is trying to demonstrate their innocence. What judges don't see as often is someone who simply sits quietly and lets the evidence speak. So we prepared the evidence. Every exhibit labeled, time-stamped, sourced. Audio files certified by a forensic audio consultant. Financial records annotated. Ava's statement notarized. A statement from the woman in the conference photograph, who, when Fenwick explained how her image had been used, agreed immediately to testify. She was angry in the way restrained people are angry. Completely. The morning of the hearing, I put on a dark gray suit, nothing expensive looking, appropriate. I arrived 11 minutes early and sat in the car until it was time. Stella arrived with Prescott, her attorney, a man with a regional reputation for winning spousal support cases through aggressive characterization of opposing parties. He was good at making men look like they were hiding something. Stella was dressed elegantly, dark blazer, hair pulled back, small pearl earrings. She looked exactly as she wanted to look, a composed woman who had been through something difficult. She didn't look at me when she sat down. I looked at her. Nothing readable on my face. Prescott opened with confidence. Knox was unfaithful, emotionally neglectful. Knox had disappeared after the divorce, concealed his income through obscured business structures, and was now living comfortably while his ex-wife bore the full weight of raising 2 children alone. He asked for permanent alimony and a judicial audit of Knox's assets. Stella's testimony was so controlled, I understood she had rehearsed it until she sounded like she was remembering, not reading. She described Knox's detachment, his absences, the erosion of trust. She mentioned the infidelity obliquely. She teared up twice, briefly, controlled, not theatrical. Effective. She was good, I'll give her that. Then Horace stood. He asked her 3 questions. The first 2 were procedural. Then, "Mrs. Stella, during the 5 years preceding the filing of this petition, did you maintain any ongoing financial relationship with individuals outside this marriage?" "No," she answered, calmly, directly, eyes steady. Horace nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said, and sat down. The courtroom settled into quiet. Then Horace said, without standing, with no change in tone, "Your Honor, the respondent would like to introduce a number of certified exhibits and 1 audio-visual file." Prescott was on his feet immediately. "Objections, procedural impropriety," Horace addressed the judge directly. The forensic certification had been completed within the allowable filing window, and opposing counsel had been formally notified via docket entry the previous morning. "Submissions are permitted," Hargrave said. "Proceed." Horace opened his laptop, connected it to the courtroom display, and pressed play. A second of audio hiss. Then, Stella's voice, clear, unmistakable, filled the courtroom. "He'll resist. We need the photo analysis to be enough." No one moved. Not gasps, not murmuring, just a room full of people encountering a different reality, and the few seconds it took their minds to decide what to do with it. Prescott's pen stopped midway. Stella's hands went flat on the table. Judge Hargrave removed his reading glasses. The first file ran 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Stella and Dario discussing which copy of the photograph to use, how to present it, how to explain why she hadn't come forward sooner. Dario suggested she frame it as denial, that she'd hoped she was wrong. Stella said that would work because it would generate sympathy without weakness. She said it the way a person talks about a workable task. Not a marriage, not a family, a workable task. The financial documents came next. 17 months of transfers, cross-referenced with the Shell LLC registration. Horace traced the money from one place to the other and let the geography speak. The LLC had been registered 14 months before Stella made the accusation. Then Ava testified, plainly, consistently, without looking at Stella. The conversations she had overheard. The dates she had written in her notebook that same evening. Prescott cross-examined her for 11 minutes, challenging her motives and reliability. When he finished, the only thing he had established was that she had left the firm under difficult circumstances, which she had never denied, and which had no bearing on her notes. The conference witness testified last. She and I had spoken once, briefly, at a registration desk. She had never visited our city, never met Stella. In the witness statement submitted in the original divorce proceeding, with her name and an alleged signature attesting to an ongoing relationship between us, was not something she had ever written, seen, or signed. She had learned of its existence 4 months earlier when Fenwick contacted her. She had immediately retained her own attorney. Horace submitted the forensic handwriting analysis as his final exhibit. 2 independent analysts. The same conclusion. The signature did not match across 14 verified samples. It was a forgery, clean, careful, and submitted to a court as authentic evidence. Prescott requested a recess. His voice had lost its earlier clarity. Hargrave denied it. He set down his pen, looked at the evidence log, then looked at Stella. "I want to be very clear, Mrs. Stella. This court is now reviewing the original custody determination in its entirety in light of these submissions." Stella's hands pressed down slightly on the table, the only visible crack in 3 years of construction. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and looked toward the exit. For the first time since that Tuesday evening in March, I took a breath that had nothing in it but air. Hargrave's fraud referral reached the district attorney's office within 2 weeks. The forged witness statement, a real woman's name, a fabricated signature, submitted as official court evidence, was classified under 2 charges: fraud upon the court and identity document forgery. In our state, those charges together carry a mandatory minimum: no probation, no conditional sentence. The timeline made intent irrefutable. 14 months of planning, a shell company, a fabricated photograph, a forged signature. Stella was sentenced to 18 months, consecutive, no early release. I wasn't in the courtroom for sentencing. I didn't need to be. Dario was subpoenaed, retained an attorney, and said as little as legally possible. No criminal charges were filed against him. His role in the forgery couldn't be established beyond what was already documented. But the subpoena was public record. The LLC was public record. The financial arrangements became part of the civil case materials, also public. His studio lost its primary corporate contract within 6 weeks. He didn't close his business. He simply became someone whose name now carried a story in a region where professional reputation moves through a small enough network that stories tend to stick. I didn't arrange any of that. The case did it. That's the beauty of building something correctly. You don't have to maintain it. It stands on its own. Petra reached out 6 days after sentencing. I thought about it carefully. She hadn't acted with malicious intent. Stella had told her Knox had privately admitted to the affair to a mutual friend, detailed enough to sound credible because people don't expect those close to them to construct elaborate lies. Petra passed it to my mother, thinking she was preparing her for something true. When the recording surfaced and the case went public, Petra found out through local news, reading in black and white that the story she had been given and passed along had been fabricated. Our first conversation in 3 years lasted 20 minutes. Uncomfortable, the way honest things are. She apologized. I told her I understood how it happened. Neither of us pretended that understanding made those 3 years shorter. We left the door open. For now, that's enough. Full custody was transferred to me immediately following sentencing. The morning Ren and Colt first woke up in my house wasn't cinematic. Ren came downstairs in mismatched socks and asked if we had eggs. Colt had already found a nature documentary channel before I'd made coffee. I stood at the stove making scrambled eggs, the TV too loud, Ren asking me something I wasn't fully tracking, because I was just present. In my house, with my kids, on a Tuesday morning. That was the moment. It didn't announce itself. It just was. The last time I saw Stella was the day of the final civil judgment. As I passed her near the courthouse exit, close enough that for a moment it was just the two of us, I said it quietly, without performance. You should have made sure I stayed broken. She didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She wasn't looking at the man she had carefully taken apart over 14 months. She was looking at proof that it hadn't worked. That while she was building a case against me, I had been building everything else. That the silence had never been surrender. It had been preparation. I'm writing this because someone out there is in the first year of what I went through. Someone just had the ground taken out from under them by someone who planned it. People they trusted are telling them the story is already decided. They're thinking about fighting loudly, immediately, desperately. Don't. Stop. Document everything. Find one person who operates in good faith and keep them close. Build in silence. Don't move until what you have is so clean it cannot be argued with. The people who tried to leave you broken are counting on you staying that way. The most devastating thing you can do is simply not. Take care of yourself. Knox.